Hey guys, tonight we're sneaking into the pre-dawn hush of a Fatimid herbalist's kitchen, where steam curls like a conspirator's whisper. Picture this. You're kneeling on a worn reed mat, your fingertips tracing the pitted copper of a kettle older than your great-grandmother's dating history. Outside, Cairo's minarets glow like half-eaten honey cakes, the call to prayer still clawing its way up the muezzin's sleep-rough throat. Let's be real. You'd last 5 minutes here before accidentally poisoning a vizier, or worse, spilling saffron on a silk cushion. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. Let's see who's burning the midnight oil from Texas to Timbuktu. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The charcoal brazier hisses beneath your knees, each ember a tiny sun collapsing. You blow on the coals, ash fluttering like moth wings, and cradle the kettle's curved belly. Historians love debating whether Fatimid healers used silver or clay for their first brews. But we know they stole the design from Byzantine apothecaries during that awkward phase when everyone was invading everyone. Water shudders in the pot, a low growl rising to a gossamer scream. You toss in dried lavender, purple buds sinking like miniature ships. Fun fact: Fatimid royals once tried importing French lavender, only to discover it made their prized camels projectile sneeze. Back to local crops they went. The scent hits you, a floral uppercut to the sinuses. Your eyes drift to the lattice window, where dawn finger paints the Nile's sluggish curves. A donkey brays in the distance, some poor soul already hauling melons to the souk. You stir the brew with a cinnamon stick, because spoons are for peasants and Frankish crusaders. The steam fogs your vision, melting the room into a watercolor of terracotta and shadow. Your knuckles graze the kettle's spout, a blister waiting to happen. A cockroach scuttles over your toe, R.I.P. to viewers with entomophobia. But you're too busy channeling Zen master vibes to care. The liquid murmurs, now the color of a brew's healing. You pour a tentative sip into a thimble-sized cup, gilded with quicksilver patterns worn soft by centuries of paranoid lip-smacking. Ever wonder why herbalists taste test poisons like it's a TikTok trend? Blame Caliph al-Hakim, that guy who banned grapes and ordered dogs exterminated. He demanded his taster's drink from the same cup, a twisted version of the couple that detoxes together, stays together. The lavender tea scalds your tongue, notes of earth and soap, and a student loan, officer's desperation. You gag, then force a smile like this isn't the worst kombucha flavor ever invented. Outside, a merchant's cart creaks past, dates spilling onto the dust in sticky amber piles. Your kettle whistles again, a sound that'll haunt your dreams more than that ex who still likes your beach pics from 2019. You dump the brew into a clay cistern, watch it seep into the porous walls. Turns out, this isn't even the final tea. It's a rinse, a ritual purge for the kettle's memory. Because apparently, cookware needs therapy too. The real magic happens next, when you'll add rosewater smuggled from a Damascus garden, burned to cinders last summer. But patience, grasshopper, right now, you're just the opening act, the janitor of ancient caffeine rituals. A bead of sweat rolls down your spine, the brazier's heat now flirting with degree burns. You reach for a hemp cloth dyed indigo with fermented snails and dab your forehead. Historians still argue whether snail juice really made fabrics brighter, or if medieval dyers just enjoyed freaking out their apprentices. The linen scratches your skin rough as a sailor's confession. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a child wails, a sound as common here as the scratch of reed pens on tax ledgers. You refill the kettle, water drawn from a well so deep. Rumor says it connects to an underground river of molten silver. The first rinse was practice, a dress rehearsal for the alchemy ahead. Now, the true herbs emerge, sage harvested during a waxing moon, fenugreek aged in a cedar box, cardamom pods split open like green scars. Your mortar waits, its volcanic stone pocked from 1,000 grindings. The lavender was just the warm-up, like doing squats before stealing a horse. Your hands hover over the ingredients, palms tingling from earlier burns. A distant rooster crows, 2 hours late for its shift. You crush sage leaves between thumb and forefinger, releasing a scent that's equal parts Thanksgiving turkey and your hippie ant's storage unit. The wind shifts, carrying the tang of the Nile's algae-choked banks. You're about to toss the herbs in when plot twist, the kettle cracks. A hairline fracture snakes up its side, your life flashing before your eyes like a defective zoetrope. Turns out, heating ancient metal isn't the self-care trend they promised. You freeze, half expecting the ghost of a paranoid caliph to materialize and deduct this from your paycheck. But the kettle holds water weeping through the crack like tears from a particularly dramatic soap opera star. So you improvise, wrapping the pot in a soaked linen strip. Steam hisses through the bandage, a makeshift sauna for your impending failure. The herbs steep anyway, because history's built on duct tape and audacity. Your brew darkens, a concoction that'd make a Starbucks barista cross herself. You lift the cup, its rim chipped from the time a disgruntled eunuch threw it at a tax collector. The first sip tastes like regret and floral shampoo. But hey, at least the muezzin's finally awake. His call spirals over the rooftops, a melody older than the cracked earth beneath your knees. You swallow and wait for dawn to finish its lazy stretch across Cairo's sand-rasped sky. You step into the spice vault, its cedar shelves bowing under jars fat with forgotten treasures. Faded labels mock your Arabic. M. A. Macron letter to B. Al Samak can't mean fish tears, can it? The dust tickles your nose like a court jester's feather. Somewhere beyond the lattice, that same dove coos about your dwindling daylight. Your pinky hooks a jar of saffron mango peel, sunlight stroking its amber glass. Did you know 10th century Cairo imported mangoes from India via Fatimid trade routes? Crushed bark from Zanzibar ebony trees lines the lid. Historians still argue whether these jars were airtight or just aristocratic wishful thinking. The leather seal crumbles like Pharaoh's beard. 3 steps left. There's the galangal root reserved for Viziers' indigestion. You smirk. Royal flatulence is definitely PG-13. Your sleeve catches a bottle of dried Persian figs, and suddenly you're 9 again, stealing sweets from your aunt's larder. Memory's a tricky spice, best measured in pinches. A breeze sneaks through the lattice. Papers flutter, revealing a scroll about Libyan scorpion venom antidotes. Quirky. The nilometer measured flood levels, but palace records mention using crocodile dung to waterproof these very shelves. You don't question it. The dove's now perched on a pickle urn, judging your life choices. You uncork a vial of Tunisian rosemary oil. Its bite cuts through the musk. Court herbalists allegedly poisoned 2 caliphs in lemon-infused cordials, but allegedly pays your wages. The scent flares your nostrils, a mental etch-a-sketch wiped clean. Sunlight slants, golden hour for clarity brews. You grab myrrh resin from Yemen, or was it Oman? Traitors lie more than poets, crushing it with honey's safer. Hafsa bint al-Hajj recommended that in her 12th century physic garden manual. Didn't stop her from dying by poisoned quince jam. Priorities. 2 fingers scoop cloud-colored salt from Siwa Oasis. You hum a lullaby salt vendors sang, the melody warped by 30 years of bad wine. 3 quick taps on the mortar's rim, your grandmother's rhythm. The dove flaps away, off to gossip with the muezzin. You blend cumin and coriander, double-checking ratios etched into the jar's underside. Clever like hieroglyphs for paranoid chefs, was Hatshepsut's architect high on myrrh when designing Deir el-Bahari? Worth a dissertation, or at least a tavern anecdote. The mix hisses against copper, a sound like lazy serpents. Twilight seeps in time to choose, saffron for sharpness, or black lime for its slow burn. You drizzle date syrup over both. Compromise tastes like palace politics, sweet enough to hide the grit. The first sip pricks your tongue, alertness unfurling like lotus petals at midnight. Somewhere beyond the garden wall, a donkey brays at the unfairness of existence. You nod, finally something relatable. The donkey's complaint hangs in the air when ironclad knuckles thud at your door. The Vizier's signet ring biting into aged wood. You unbar the latch. His silhouette swallows the threshold like a sandstorm. Historians love debating whether Fatimid Viziers truly carried ivory-handled daggers. But the blade at his hip gleams unambiguously in the lamplight. He thrusts a parchment sealed with fig tree wax under your nose, its underside smeared with what might be mulberry juice or congealed panic. The caliph's brother tossed till dawn again. He growls, voice rasping like a rusted Noria water wheel. You note his ink-stained thumb, 20 years of policy drafts etched into cracked cuticles. Chamomile's the obvious play, but Delta honey makes this political. The Nile's western marshes produce the good stuff, bribes in apiary form. You murmur pleasantries while reaching for the alabaster jar labeled lion's milk. In overly optimistic Kufic script, the Viziers' gaze lingers on your spice shelves, calculating market values or assassination opportunities. Crushed petals hiss in hot milk, those little yellow florets once stuffed into Cleopatra's silk pillows. Quirky trivia: her royal beekeepers wore silver gloves to avoid stings, or so Alexandrian scrolls claim. Steam swirls into the Vizier's face. He inhales like a man, remembering how breath works. You're certain this isn't one of Ibn Sina's prank recipes. He mutters, referencing that time the philosopher slipped camel thistle laxatives into a sultan's sherbet. You smirk, dribbling honey so thick it makes the spoon stand upright, a trick gleaned from Delta beekeepers who whisper to their hives at dusk. The first sip smooths his frown lines. Outside, the muezzin's second call frays at the edges, swaying like a drunk mourner. You resist pointing out that no tonic fixes the real issue, governing an empire on 3 hours sleep. He drains the cup with a courtier's efficiency. The wax seal cracks as he departs, leaving the scent of bergamot and unspoken threats. You rinse the vessel in lemon water, wondering if historians will ever agree whether Fatimid insomnia stemmed from anxiety, or all that damn sugarcane syrup they swigged nightly. Moonlight pools on the brass tray, your reflection warped into a sleepy ghoul. You pocket the Vizier's gold dinar, its edges worn smooth by a century of sleepless palms. Somewhere, a scribe dips his pen, documenting tonight's transaction as medicinal consultation. History's just receipts with better handwriting. The dove returns, perched atop a jar of rhubarb root. It cocks its head, as if asking why you bother with tonics when oblivion comes free. You flick a chamomile bud at it, miss by a mile. The bird's coo sounds suspiciously like laughter. Dawn's first light will find the Vizier snoring at his desk, ink blotting a treaty with Byzantium. But for now, you sweep petals from the mortar, their golden corpses scenting the floor. Sleep's overrated anyway, unless you're the one selling it. Your sandals crush time underfoot, releasing a pepper-sharp scent that scatters sleep. The garden walls loom, their shadows jagged as a Vizier's temper. Moonlight slicks the jasmine vines, silvered petals half curled like shy concubines. Harvesting now means racing the sun. Once dawn bleaches these blooms, their essence turns common as gossip. You set the lantern on a weathered plinth, its pierced brass casting leopard spots on the path. Historians adore debating whether Fatimid nobles added saffron to garden irrigation. But tonight's task demands quieter myths. Your shears snick, stems parting with wet whispers. Each blossom falls into the basket, a drift of cold stars in your hands. Dew soaks through your sleeves, the linen clinging like a clingy merchant's nephew. A bat swoops, its shadow brushing your cheek as it gulps moths. Quirky fact: some court perfumers believed night-flying insects improved floral oils. You're just glad they're not scorpions. The jasmine's sweetness thickens, cloying as a poet's love verses. Your mind drifts to Cleopatra's infamous pearl, dissolve in vinegar, frivolous stunts versus real alchemy. A thorn nicks your thumb, the sting sharpens your focus. Blood spices the air, metallic and oddly alive. Rows of basil quiver, their leaves rattling desert dry, despite the damp. You pocket a sprig, its crispness slicing through the jasmine fog. Somewhere beyond the wall, a guard coughs, the sound swallowed by night's velvet throat. Pale petals bruise easily, their oils fleeing at rough touches. You mimic the Alexandrian method, plucking with silk-wrapped fingertips. Your great-aunt swore it pleased the flower djinn, though she also thought onions cured baldness. The basket grows heavy, a constellation of stolen moonlight. Lantern light gutters, wick drowning in its own wax. You snap the shears shut, blades gleaming like a traitor's smile. Wind riffles the vines, their rustle a language lost today. Dawn's first blush creeps the eastern sky, indigo bleeding into spoiled milk. Historians still argue whether these gardens held hidden opium plots. But you've only ever found roses and regret. Dew clings to your hem each step, leaving damp footprints on the stones. Somewhere a cock crows, its cry fraying night's edge. You pause, inhaling jasmine's farewell sigh. By noon, these petals will swim in almond oil, trapped beauty distilled into perfume. The guard's cough comes again, closer now. You douse the lantern, smoke curling like a scorned lover's sigh. Shadows swallow you whole. Let the scholars scribble their theories. You've got blossoms to press before the Vizier wakes. The workshop's clay walls hold yesterday's heat, stale as bread left in the sun. You brace the copper mortar between your knees, its curves worn smooth by a century of remedies. Dawn seeps through the lattice, gilding the cinnamon logs waiting on reed mats. Their bark curls inward like scrolls, each layer a captured desert wind. Historians go rabid over silk road ledgers, but you know the real story lives in your blistered palms. The pestil's weight settles in your grip, a familiar ache blooming in your wrist. First twist grinds bark into grit, the sound like sand devils kissing stone. Heat rises from friction, a dry perfume stinging your nostrils. Your great uncle claimed mortars sang, if you listened, this one's definitely off-key. Cinnamon dust powders your lap, a russet stain blooming across linen. You envy the spice traitors, their glamorous tailies, caravans, braving leopard attacks and monsoons. Truth: most smugglers just bribed customs officers with peppercorns. The mortar clangs, a metallic whine scattering your thoughts. 3 more rotations, the rhythm of a lame camel's gait. A dove coos outside, its call syncopating with your grinding. Medieval midwives hid cinnamon under birthing beds, believed to ease labor pains. You've seen more screaming newborns than quiet ones, but who's counting? The bark surrenders, its final fibers dissolving into powder. Sunlight slants across the table, exposing flecks of mica in the mortar's belly. Historians still argue whether spice blends were medicine or status symbols. You stir the dust, its aroma piercing the room's honeyed haze. Memory hits, the Viziers scribe sneezing last week, scattering your notes like cursed confetti. Your thumbnail flicks a beetle from the mixture, its iridescent shell glinting green gold. 3 street cats materialize at the window, eyes fixed on your hands. Fatimid recipe books warn about feline interference, but you've lost more coriander to mice. The cinnamon's bite sharpens, clearing your head like a slap from a wet nurse. You portion the powder into linen sachets, their edges tied with hemp twine. One pouch tears, a tawny cloud dusting your forearm. Outside, servants' footsteps patter toward the kitchens, their gossip floating like steam. Sticky resin clings to the pestle, sweat and spice marrying into amber glue. You scrape it off with a horn knife, the blade's edge jagged from too many tile repairs. Some idiot scholar probably wrote epics about this tool. You're just glad it's not your elbow doing the grinding. Shadows shrink as the sun climbs. Ants begin their death march across the windowsill. You sprinkle cinnamon on their trail, a petty mercy to redirect them. The oldest kitchen slave claims it wards off gin, but she also thinks hiccups mean someone's plotting your death. When the last sachet's sealed, you slump against the wall. Cinnamon oils prickle your throat, a pleasant burn like swallowing sunlight. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a camel brays, its complaint echoing through the humid air. The Vizier's servants will arrive soon, lips pursed, hands outstretched, eyes hungry for miracles. The caravan stench hits first, sour camels and moldy saddle leather. You brace against the doorway, wrinkling your nose at the merchant's onion-reeking bow. His fingernails dig into a velvet pouch, knuckles scarred from a lifetime of haggling. Historians fawn over Fatimid trade maps, but real commerce reeks of unwashed armpits and desperation. He spills blackened resin chunks onto your table, their edges sharp as broken teeth. Myrrh from Nubia, he rasps, eyeing the copper scales like a hawk circling prey. You know the route up the Nile, through a dozen greedy toll stations. Medieval customs records mention myrrh traded for Chinese silk. This batch probably swapped hands for stolen dates and flattery. You snap a resin nub, its fractured core oozing amber sap. The merchant leans closer, his breath reeking of fermented mare's milk. Smoke from this cures fevers, he insists, pointing to a brown stain on his robe. You've heard the rumors, Nubian healers burning myrrh during plagues, and also during really pungent street festivals. The scales tremble, you add a 4th gold dinar to counterbalance the resin. His palm slaps the table, a lizard tattoo peeking from his sleeve. Historians still argue whether myrrh's true value was medicinal or just smelled better than burning camel dung. Outside, a street vendor shouts about fried locusts. The merchant's stomach growls in unison. You eye the resin's bluish veins, a sign of skilled tapping or clever dye. He claims it's from trees blessed by rain priests. But you've met those priests. They'll bless a pile of goat droppings for half a loaf. The dinar stack grows, your life, savings shrinking into his grubby satchel. A resin chunk crumbles, powder puffing up to coat a passing fly. It staggers midair, wings gummed shut by the ancient sap. 12 years ago, a Byzantine envoy paid triple weight for gag gifts like that. The merchant's grin reveals a missing canine, your cue to stop asking questions. You press a palm to the scales, testing their balance with practiced spite. Salt crusts the resin chunks, proof they crossed the desert in salted fish barrels. A niche trick hides scent from tax collectors and overly loyal dogs. He chuckles when you mention it, admits he also transports pearls in sheep intestines. Appetizing. Dust motes swirl in the late light, gilding the tension between you. The merchant pockets his gold coins clinking like a petty tyrant's laughter. Some idiot poet probably compared myrrh to frozen sunlight. You just hope it silences the Vizier's cough. He leaves a trail of cumin seeds, deliberate, or just holy pockets. You crush one underfoot, its spice sharp against the room's musky gloom. Fatimid customs codes required resin inspections, but who's checking after 3 cups of date wine? The myrrh's scent unfurls, smoky and medicinal, with a top note of existential dread. You'll have to grind it before sunset, the moonless night's best for volatile compounds. Or so claims a scroll you half remember between naps. Ants swarm the fallen cumin, their tiny bodies hauling yellow treasure. You let them feast, considering how many died transporting that resin across continents. The merchant's donkey brays outside, a raspy complaint that'll haunt your dreams. Knife scraping resin into flakes, blade catching on decades-old tree tears. Each sliver holds a story, probably involving dysentery and regretted life choices. You hum a lullaby the flax girl sings, off-key, but the myrrh doesn't judge. 3 black-robed scholars pass your window, arguing over zodiac herbology. Their hymns kick up dust that settles on your workspace. Perfect. You'll bill the caliph extra for scholarly particulates, a surcharge even the vizier can't decode. The mortar accepts the first resin chunk, its copper belly already stained by a century of remedies. You wonder who ground poisons here, and whether they died before settling their tab. The pestil's grip feels heavier tonight, or maybe your paranoia's just better hydrated. Crushed myrrh releases a vapor sharp enough to make a jackal weep. You've heard tales of healers hallucinating angels in the smoke, though angels rarely smell like burnt hair. Outside, the call to prayer drowns your sneeze, 8-part harmony, masking mortal grossness. When the last flake's powdered, you sag onto a cushion that's mostly sand. The merchant's gold weighs your robe down, right where pickpockets lurk. Some days, You miss your village's mediocre herb garden until remembering it reeked of Uncle Farouk's feet. Lamplight stains the myrrh jar's label, your handwriting slanting like a drunk scorpion. You should note the purchase date, but dating things invites accountability. Let historians solve the mystery centuries from now, preferably while choking on their own theories. Heat lingers in the mortar's curves, a fading echo of labor. You press a cheek to its rim, metal cooler than the merchant's bargaining tactics. The workshop's shadows stretch toward dawn, resin-scented ghosts claiming their share of the night. The door creaks, its sound as familiar as your own sigh. He enters favoring the left leg, the same knee that once stopped a rebel's dagger. You smell the ointments before seeing him, mint and rot wrestling in the air. Eunuchs controlled the Fatimid caliph's harem, but nobody controls old wounds. His robe's hem drags through resin dust, leaving a trail of condemned myrrh. You gesture to the stool, its cushion still dented from the merchant's bony rear. He sinks down, hands gripping the kneecap like it's a misbehaving child. The scar peeks through thin linen, a jagged valley splitting parchment skin. Damp weather, he mutters, rubbing the joint as if polishing brass. You nod, though everyone knows Cairo's air couldn't moisten a date pit. Historians still argue whether court eunuchs were master strategists or just pawns who overheard too much. His eyes narrow. You've seen that look in camels before they bite. You reach for the frankincense, its granules clinking like broken promises. The jars as old as his injury, resin fossilized into amber pebbles. Crusaders once burned this stuff in champagne glasses. Or was that Venetian merchants? Memory blurs after midnight. The pestle strikes copper, a dull gong announcing your incompetence. He flinches at each grind, shoulders hunched against phantom blades. You recall a scroll claiming eunuchs felt less pain, clearly written by someone with intact testicles. 3 twists, the resin surrenders into powder. Beeswax follows, golden drips from a comb traded for spoonfuls of lies. The brazier's heat licks the crucible, its smoke stinging your lashes. You stir with a porcupine quill, the only tool he hasn't stolen yet. The mixture thickens, resembling the Sultan's third wife's foundation cream. His sandal taps an impatient rhythm, a habit that got scribes flogged last Ramadan. You drizzle Delta honey, its sweetness masking the frankincense's bitter edge. A Roman text swore honey from cypresses, hives healed Trojan War wounds. But you're using the cheap stuff. The paste bubbles, trapping air pockets like miniature screams. He unbinds the linen, revealing scar tissue, twisted into a crocodile's grin. You smear the poultice thick, fingers avoiding the puckered knife entry. His breath hitches, a sound you last heard from a stepped-on lute. Feels like fire. He hisses, fingernails carving crescents into the stool. You shrug. Great healing often resembles great harm. The beeswax cools, sealing the wound beneath a glossy carapace. Some idiot poet compared therapy to rebirth. But really, It's just hot wax and lies. He rises, testing the leg like a foal on frozen ground. The poultice crackles with each step, a bread crust strapped to his knee. You wonder if rebels mocked his limp, or if their ghosts still do. His payment clinks onto the table, coins warmed by a hidden pouch. The door slams, its echo rattling jars of dried misfortune. You scrape leftover paste into a vial, labeling it dragon's bile for gullible viziers. Through the window, his silhouette shrinks toward the barracks. Flickering torches, historians will parse his ledgers for secrets, never guessing his greatest ache fit in a crucible. Night air slips in carrying the stench of the stable's new camel. You wash the mortar, frankincense residue bleeding into cloudy water. The braziers, embers whisper tales of better healers, but they're all dead or drunk. Your cushion beckons, its sand shifted into the shape of surrender. You wipe frankincense residue from your nails, each crescent packed with resinous spite. Sunset bleeds through the latticed window, the sky steeped like overbrewed tea. Time to harvest yesterday's rose hips, their plump bodies shriveled into wisdom. The clay jar cracks as you pry it open, dried petals whispering gossip. Cairo's apothecaries once traded rose hips for their weight in silver during sieges. Vitamin C being the original plague shield. Your fingers sift through the husks, rejecting any with blackened tips. 3 measures into the mortar, the rose hips clatter like dice. You add cracked coriander, its citrus bite cutting through the fruit's melancholy. Crusaders called this brew Saracen's comfort, though they probably stole the recipe mid-sack. Boiling water hisses, a rebellious sound in the cooling air. You pour it slow, watching petals unfurl like miniature resurrection scenes. Steam carries memories of palace gardens, pruning shears dangling from your sash. Eunuchs betting on sparrow fights. A knock interrupts. The Vizier's page boy proffers a crumpled note. His ink-stained fingers tremble. You spot henna patterns from a sweetheart's farewell. The request, a joy infusion for the caliph's dyspeptic falcon. You nod, but first, finish the sunset ritual. Alchemists once swore rose petal ash could mimic the philosopher's stone's red stage. All it ever made was pricey dust. You strain the tea through silk, its ruby hue deepening as shadows swallow the room. The first sip prickles your tongue, tart as a muezzin's unvoiced opinion. You drizzle in honeycomb scrapings, gold dissolving into garnet. Historians still debate if Fatimid hospitals used rosewater as perfume or disinfectant. Pourquoi no lows dues. Outside, merchants' shutter stalls, wooden slats clapping like tired applause. Your brazier coughs up one last ember, its glow gilding the cup's rim. You count 7 rose thorns embedded in the table, each a tiny monument to hasty harvesting. The tea's warmth spreads through your ribs, a liquid shawl against dusk's chill. Somewhere beyond the walls, Nile tributaries swallow the sun's reflection, water blackening like burnt sugar. You swirl the dregs, petals forming a constellation only drunks claim to read. Footsteps echo in the corridor, probably the falcon handler coming to nag. You gulp the last bitter mouthful, vowing to spike the bird's dose with fig laxative. Moonlight leaks through the lattice, checkering your hands like a scribe's abandoned manuscript. The empty cup cools its shadow, stretching across the table. You trace the rim's chip, a souvenir. From that time, the Nubian envoy got handsy with a hookah. Night unspools its velvet silence, ready to swallow your next mistake whole. The scholar stumbles in, ink smearing his sleeve like a drunkard's signature. Star charts spill across your work table, their astrological symbols blurring into Rorschach blots. His fingers tap an erratic rhythm, the same tempo as overclocked pigeons. You recognize the symptoms. Another mind knotted by celestial math, the Fatimid obsession with aligning earthly rule to Mercury's orbit. Their libraries once held Ibn Yunus, planetary tables, revolutionary calculations scribbled on gazelle parchment. The conjunction, he mutters, plucking at his beard. Half-moons glow beneath his nails. Indigo from weeks grinding lapis lazuli ink. Historians still argue whether House of Wisdom scribes added crushed scarab shells to their mixtures for permanence against time's erasure. Your mortar finds the mint first, cool leaves slapped fresh from the courtyard pots. Their aroma slices through the scholar's musk, peppermint's icy blade against brain fog. Lemon peel curls follow, citrus oils stinging your knuckles like tiny paper cuts. Focus isn't forged in a crucible, you say, shoving elderflowers into the brew. It's steamed loose like layered pastry. He doesn't laugh. The teapot sings, its spout issuing a thin, reedy whistle. Steam billows upward, condensing on the copper ceiling tiles. You imagine droplets forming new constellations up there, with the scholar's beloved Ursa Major. He grabs the cup too fast, scalding his palm. 5 centuries from now, TED talkers will praise multitasking as innovation. But haste still burns. You slide a honey-soaked date across the table sticky balm for both ego and flesh. 3 sips in his shoulders drop. The tonic's trifecta works. Mint slices through mental cobwebs. Lemon oil polishes neurons. Elderflower softens the edges of obsession. Outside, a donkey brays, its hee-haw syncopated with bubbling liquid. The decimals, he whispers, eyes suddenly wide. Al-Biruni's equinox calculations, they're misaligned by a fraction. You nod, though celestial mechanics bore you. Give the same brew to a potter, they'd see flaws in glaze symmetry. Perceptions, a fickle alchemist. He drains the cup, tracing a Jupiter glyph in the dregs. Scholars once believed tea steeped during planetary retrograde held prophetic powers. Then coffee arrived, and everyone got jittery instead. His parting gift, a star chart fragment scribbled with marginalia about Venusian tides. You'll use it later to wrap saffron, irony being cheaper than parchment. The brazier sighs, embers winking like dying dwarf stars. You pluck an elderflower from your sleeve, its petals already wilting in the residual heat. Knowledge fades just as quick here today, pigeon food tomorrow. Rinsing the cup, you find a last mint leaf clinging to the rim. It shivers in the water, a green comma punctuating nothing. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, the scholar's sandals slap stone, each step lighter than his cosmic burdens. The concubine's silk slippers whisper against tiles, once dyed with crushed murex shells for royal purple. Now they're scuffed gray, like her eyes beneath the veil. She clutches a narcissus, its petals browned at the edges. You recall her laughter last monsoon season, a sound that made eunuchs pause their dice games. Fatimid court poets liken such women to moonlit jasmine, easy to admire, harder to keep alive. Historians still argue whether concubines like her sipped poppy tinctures to smother unwanted desires, or stoked them with cardamom-laced wine. The truth's buried deeper than the caliphs stashed emeralds. He gifted me this the night the Nubian envoy came, she says, voice fraying. The narcissus trembles in her grip. You note the bruise blooming beneath her left sleeve, violet petals beneath gossamer. Your fingers find dried marigold first, their orange gold heads stored in a sandalwood box. Monarchs once thought these petals could bind lovers' fates, a superstition as useful as a paper shield. The mortar crushes them gently, releasing a scent like overripe sunshine. Apricot pits come next. You crack one with a silver mallet, its almond-shaped core bitter as regret. Some herbalists claim the kernels grant prophetic dreams, though you've yet to meet a seer who isn't half mad. She watches you steep the brew, steam curling into shapes only the heartbroken recognize. 3 Fatimid dynasties rose and fell by the time her teapot whistles. The sound startles a gecko off the wall, its tail leaving a squiggle in the dust. Drink it like you're drowning, you advise, pushing the cup across the table. But slower, her first sip leaves a golden smear on the rim, marigold pollen clinging to chapped lips. Outside, a gardener clips bay laurel, the snip-snip, syncopated with her trembling breaths. You count 13 heartbeats before her shoulders relax. Exactly the time it takes for a desert hare to vanish into scrub. They say Sit al-Mulk poisoned her own brother for the throne. She murmurs, staring into the dregs. The rumors older than Cairo's sewers, yet still fresh on every servant's tongue. You shrug. They also say scorpion venom improves eyesight. People will swallow anything. A laugh escapes her sharp and sudden as a shattered vial. It dies quickly. Her fingers trace the narcissus stem, now stripped bare. You wonder if she knows apricot pits release cyanide when chewed, a fact as comforting as an executioner's kiss. The second sip lingers on her tongue, tastes like my mother's orchard before the locusts came. Memories, a crooked pharmacist, you say, sweeping fallen petals into a brass tray. It sweetens what was bitter, spoils what was sweet. Dusk stains the courtyard ochre. She drains the cup, its residue gleaming like molten amber. A breeze snatches the wilted narcissus from her hand. carries it toward the latticed window. For a heartbeat, she's 17 again, reaching for a blossom just beyond her grasp. The gardeners will plant new ones tomorrow, you remark, though both know some roots never take. Her departure leaves a trail of rosewater scent and unanswered questions. You rinse the cup, the marigold stain, resisting like a stubborn ghost. Beneath the work table, a drop of spilled brew solidifies into resin future archaeologists will debate whether it's perfume or poison. The gecko returns, lapping at the residue. Its tongue flicks twice, then it flees into the shadows. Even reptiles know some remedies aren't meant to be tasted twice. The gecko's tail flicks into darkness, leaving you alone with copper bowls and the well's iron scent. Fatimid engineers built this cistern to mirror the celestial waters of Alioth, their brickwork precise as a calligrapher's stroke. You lower the bucket, rope groaning like a tired mule, and wait for the splash. 14 heartbeats pass. That's how long it takes prayers to reach underground aquifers, or so the well diggers guild claimed. The bucket resurfaces, dripping liquid colder than a Vizier's smile. You sip straight from the rim. Let the palace fools filter theirs through silk. You trust the earth's own filtration system. A frog plops into the water below, its croak echoing up the shaft. Some say these creatures hoard gems in their bellies. A myth you tested at age 9 with a fishing hook and a very disappointed frog. The memory tastes like rust and shame. Moonlight slices through the wellhouse window, silvering the droplets on your wrist. 3 Fatimid caliphs drank from this well daily, believing its minerals prolonged virility. Historians still argue whether their infamous fertility came from the water, or the army of concubines rotated through their chambers. You fill a clay amphora, its surface etched with ibises wading through lotus reeds. One bird's beak chips at the rim, worn smooth by a century of thumbs. Your mentor claimed water remembers every mouth it's touched, carrying whispers of the dead. You try not to think about the eunuch who drowned here during Al-Hakim's reign. His ledger, still missing 300 dinars. Dawn bleeds across the courtyard as you lug the amphora inside. Steam rises from your workshop kettle, its mating call to exhausted minds. 3 parts well water to 1 part Nile rain, the ratio scribbled in a margin of Ibn Sina's canon. You've tweaked it, adding a pinch of coral powder for clarity. A shadow looms in the doorway, the chief scribe clutching a headache thicker than tax scrolls. He eyes your cistern like it holds the answers to his inky woes. You've seen this dance before, the way bureaucrats always need remedies, but hate admitting weakness. The caliph's new ode to his favorite mare. He grumbles, thrusting a parchment at you. It needs something. You glance at the verses. They're dreadful, comparing the horse's hooves to gazelle ankles dipped in onyx. Even distilled poppy wouldn't make this drivel bearable, but silver changes hands. And suddenly, you're grinding cardamom pods into the scribe's waiting cup. He gulps it like a camel at an oasis, then freezes. This tastes like my grandmother's soap. Memory's a funny thing, you say, stirring honey into the dregs. Drink the rest. You'll revise that onyx gazelle line by noon. He leaves muttering about ungrateful steeds. You refill the amphora, noting how light bends through the water, fracturing into prism tongues. Some Sufis swear holy verses hide in those refractions, if you stare long enough. You last 7 breaths before the kitchen cat startles you, its tail swishing through the sunbeams. By midday, the well water becomes rose syrup for a merchant's daughter, then a licorice rinse for the muezzin's burnt throat. When the blacksmith arrives with a burned palm, you steep thyme and well water into a poultice. His grimace mirrors the contorted iron blades on your wall. Cool as a jinn's kiss, he growls, slapping down a dented flask as payment. Twilight brings the scent of baking bread and approaching rain. You pour the last cup for yourself, plain and unadorned. The first sip chases the clatter of the day, silences the echo of the concubine's laugh, still haunting the mortar. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, a donkey brays at the moon. You wonder if it's the same stubborn beast that kicked your mentor in 32. An incident he blamed on poor lunar alignment. The amphora sits empty, its ibises staring into nothing. You rest a hand on the rim, feeling the ghost of 1,000 sips. Come back tomorrow, you tell it, as if wells need encouragement. A drop condenses on the clay, sliding down to your fingertip. It hangs there trembling before falling to the tiles. In that moment, it contains the entire Nile. The amphora's last droplet still glistens on the tile when the knock comes, 3 staccato raps that mean now, in palace code. You wipe your hands on a linen rag, the grit of chamomile pollen clinging stubbornly. 2 Fatimid guards flank the cellar door, their chainmail smelling of rancid oil. And last, week's humiliation. His radiance requires, says the taller one, his beard braided with silver threads that catch the lamplight. You've seen those threads before, woven by the blind rug maker in the souk. Historians still argue whether the Fatimids imported silk from China or bred their own mutated silkworms. Though nobody debates those worms died happier than the rug maker. The cellar stares grown underfoot, each step releasing the musk of damp cedar. Torchlight dances across velvet sacks piled like sleeping courtiers. Your fingers find the one with twin ibex horns stitched in gold, the caliph's personal mark. Poppy resin oozes through the fabric, sticky as a confession. Guards shift behind you, swords clanking like poorly tuned lutes. One mutters about scorpions in the rafters. You smile. Last month's scorpion turned out to be a desiccated fig, though explaining that cost you a perfectly good jar of lavender balm. 47 drops into wine, the exact measure from Al-Kindi's poisoned treatise on dream manipulation. Wait, was it 46? You hesitate. The caliph's taster died screaming last winter over a similar miscalculation, his face turning the same lavender as his turban. We're paid to watch, not to wait till dawn, growls the bearded guard. And I'm paid to ensure your liege doesn't swallow his own tongue. You snap, sprinkling ground pearls as a buffer, a pointless addition. But nobles love believing shiny things negate poison. The draught swirls crimson black in its goblet, a miniature storm trapped in gold. Scholars write entire scrolls on whether the Fatimid elite used opium for transcendence or simple cowardice. You suspect it's the same reason stable boys drink date wine. Oblivion smells sweeter than regrets. Upstairs, the caliph sprawls across Turkmen carpets, his crown askew like a drunken gull. The wine disappears in 2 gulps, his throat bobbing like a nervous frog. When his eyelids flutter shut, the vizier signals dismissal with a jerk of his chin. You exit backward, a dance mastered after that unfortunate incident with the Nubian envoy's shoes. Dawn finds you scrubbing the goblet with salted vinegar. A curious ant crawls across the rim, its antennae twitching at the residue. You flick it away. The poor fellow's brotherhood brewed tea from poppy leaves during the siege of Alexandria, claiming it granted visions of winged camels. Their surrender was notably imaginative. The cellar guards return at noon, their silence thicker than molasses. The shorter one presses a honey cake into your palm, still warm from the kitchens. Palace bribery takes many forms. This one tastes of cardamom and unspoken threats. You save a crumb for the kitchen cat, its purr vibrating through the sun-warmed tiles. 3 Fatimid rulers died mid-sip from cups like yours. Autopsy records cite divine displeasure. But the palace mice know better. Their nests bulge with shreds of apothecary labels. By nightfall, the velvet sack under your mattress holds 3 fewer poppy pods, a calculated risk, like feeding a scrap to a crocodile, and hoping it mistakes you for a rock. The muezzin's cough syrup will need extra sweetness this week. Stars emerge pinpricks in an indigo curtain. You trace the little apothecary constellation, 4 dim stars forming a mortar and pestle. Your mentor swore it foretold brewing disasters. Tonight, it just looks like 4 stars. A moth lands in the dregs of the caliph's wine cup, antennae trembling toward the forgotten drops. You watch it sip, wings quivering with borrowed dreams. When it takes flight, the motion stirs the air like a conspirator's whisper. Somewhere beyond the harem walls, a nightingale screams. The moth's wings still flutter in your peripheral vision when the curtain tears open, a whirlwind of star charts and desperation. The court astrologer stumbles in robes smeared with charcoal and what might be dried mulberry juice. His eyes gleam wilder than a jackal's at midnight. Saturn ascendant, 3 nights left, he rasps, thrusting a parchment at your chest. The ink's still wet, smudging Taurus into a Rorschach blot. You dodge a trailing sleeve, its edge singed from drifting too close to an oil lamp. Mugwort bundles hang from the rafters, dried to a crisp gray-green. You snap off a sprig, crumbling it directly into the mortar. The astrologer inhales sharply. Legends say Ibn Firnas drank mugwort tea before his glider flight, crashed into a date palm, but claimed he'd touched the moon's cheek. Historians still argue whether the Andalusian inventor's flight was a coded rebellion or just bad engineering. You add fig pulp, the sticky mush, turning the mixture obsidian. Some claim Cleopatra used fig sap to read tomorrow's shadows in bronze bowls, though her beauty regimens probably involved fewer beetles. The alignment demands precision. The astrologer hisses, knocking over your vial of nightshade tincture. Then stop breathing down my neck like a faulty bellows. You mutter, sweeping shattered glass with a palm broom. The shards glitter, a miniature constellation on the floor tiles. He paces his steps, synced to some celestial metronome. The Seljuk ambassador arrives at dawn. If the stars don't speak, you pour boiling water over the mixture, steam rising in a bitter spiral. 14th century herbalists swore prophetic brews required 7 clockwise stirs. But you make it 8. Superstition loves even numbers. When you hand him the cup, black as a scorpion's pupil, he hesitates. The Codex Caronsis warns of blindness, and your horoscopes warned of a tall stranger bringing misfortune last spring, which turned out to be a giraffe for the menagerie. He drinks, gagging at the aftertaste. You press a honey-dipped date into his free hand, a courtesy for potential future patronage. The wealthy hate dying indebted. Moonlight slants through the lattice, slicing the room into geometric silvers. He collapses onto a cushion, fingers clutching his abdomen. Should it burn like fire is the element of prophecy. You lie, dumping mint leaves into a backup tisane. Academos of Byzantium wrote that visionary states mimic marsh fever, complete with sweating and mild hallucinations. Convenient that his shuddering breaths syncopate with the water clock's drip. You count 12 heartbeats before his eyes roll back, iris swallowed by pupil. The Grand Vizier's wife once paid triple for a weaker batch, claimed it helped her commune with dead parakeets. Scorpio rising, he slurs, fingernails scoring the rug's floral pattern. You prop him against a pillow embroidered with celestial maps. The Silk Road brought figs to Cairo, but don't ask how they preserved them in transit. Royal caravans had methods involving salted gazelle bladders, a detail spice merchants never include in their pamphlets. Dawn scratches at the horizon, pale fingers through a dusty sky. His twitching subsides, mouth slack around a string of drool. You've seen cadavers with more vibrant complexions. The first call to prayer rumbles through the city, a bass note felt in the ribs. The astrologer jolts awake, gaze fixed on something beyond the ceiling. The lion, with a scimitar for a mane, congratulations. You interrupt, handing him a linen towel. That's either Saturn's celestial messenger, or you hallucinated the caliph's new hat. He stumbles out, charts fluttering behind him like wounded sparrows. You salvage a half-eaten date from the floor, tossing it to the courtyard tortoise. It eyes the morsel with glacial suspicion. 3 hours later, washing the mortar, you find a single thread of gold embroidery under the work table. His robe must have snagged on a nail. Pawn shops pay handsomely for Fatimid silks, and questions die faster than mayflies here. By noon, rumors slither through the kitchens, talk of a Seljuk envoy seen consulting star charts. The head cook winks, offers you a lamb skewer for the dreamweaver. You decline. Meat sits poorly when your clientele includes both mystics and mice. The discarded date pit sprouts a pale tendril in the tortoise's shadow. You let it grow. Unplanned things often thrive here, like that time a spilled tincture birthed a cockroach the size of a sandal. Night falls, bringing an owl's cry from the northwestern tower. The backup tisane steeps forgotten in its cup, mint leaves wilting like surrendered flags. Somewhere beyond the palace, an astrologer draws new charts. Somewhere closer, a tortoise crunches through stolen honeycomb. The owl's cry fades as a warmer scent breaches the courtyard, burnt honey and scorched wheat. She arrives with dawn at her back, a linen-wrapped loaf cradled like a firstborn. The baker's knuckles gleam flour white, her apron stained with tamarind paste, and what might have been a regrettable incident involving beetroot dye. Still breathing then, she grins, slapping the bread onto your work table. Its crust crackles, a sound that would make a viper shed its skin in envy. Fatimid Cairo had communal ovens taxed by the crown, but this is bread that moonlights as a weapon. You half expect it to levitate and recite poetry. She eyes your mortar, still crusted with last night's mugwort. Heard you cured the astrologer's delusions. Pity, I liked his impending doom, discounts on lamb. You flick a rosemary twig at her. He paid in star charts and existential dread. How's the husband? Her smile wilts, a rose dipped in vinegar. 2 decades of marriage, and his hands forget the shape of my shoulder blades. The admission hangs between you, awkward as a camel in a bathhouse. You reach for the anise vial, its glass slick with condensate. 13th century couples tucked anise seeds under pillows to lure back straying hearts. Though whether it worked depended on how much both parties pretended it did. The baker's eyes track your fingers, hopeful as a beggar outside a pastry shop. 3 drops in his evening milk, you warn, tossing the vial. She catches it midair, a move honed, snatching rolls from under kitchen boys' noses, and no baking with it, unless you want the caliph's entire guard proposing to your oven. She unwraps the loaf, steam escaping like a sigh. Historians still argue whether anise tonics aided digestion or simply made people nostalgic enough to forgive snoring. You tear off a chunk, the crumb springy as a jester's gait. For a heartbeat, you're 9 again, stealing hot bread from your aunt's taboon while she argued with the tax collector. The baker pockets the vial, her thumb brushing the lotus sigil carved into the glass. They say you traded sleep potions for the Vizier's wife's pearls last winter. You shrug, mouth full of rebellion. She claimed they helped her commune with ancestral parrots. I claimed they were overpriced saltwater rocks. Her laughter shakes a dormant moth from the rafters. It staggers toward the sunlight, wings coated in yesterday's saffron dust. You pocket the remaining bread, ushering her out before the herbalist quarter smells like a bakery. The courtyard tortoise lumbers toward crumbs, its shell glittering with dew. 3 hours later, crushing time for a toothache poultice, you spot the baker's husband in the spice market. His fingers linger on a bolt of damascene silk, the fabric blue as a forget-me-not. He buys none. When he turns, you catch the faintest licorice scent clinging to his beard. By dusk, the kitchen gossips hum. A certain baker reportedly burned 12 loaves, distracted by an impromptu tasting session behind the flour sacks. You sprinkle anise seeds into the tortoise's lettuce, a silent toast to small rebellions. The stars blink on, indifferent as ever. Somewhere, an owl regurgitates a mouse skull. Somewhere closer, yeast quietly conquers the night. The tortoise blinks at your shadow, its lettuce still glittering with yesterday's anise seeds. Dawn's third call to prayer still hangs in the air when he arrives, a human vortex spinning through the courtyard arch. Wool robes whip at the rosemary bushes, leaving threads caught like surrendered flags. Sufi dervishes perfected their whirl centuries before Newton's apple, though this one seems determined to outspin a dust devil. Peace, or whatever's left after you've churned it into butter, you mutter, fumbling with cedar chips. He doesn't slow. 13 rotations per breath, or is it 14? Historians still argue whether the direction mattered more than the devotion. You've met dervishes who spun clockwise to mimic celestial orbits, others who swore counter-rotation purified the soul faster. This one's a maverick, zigging when he should zag, nearly decapitating a potted myrrh sapling. The brazier coals glow, cedar smoke curling into fat spirals. Fatimid courts burned aromatic woods to signal piety, or maybe just to mask the stench of overcrowded palaces. A chip pops, releasing resin older than the pyramids. The dervish's beard grazes your forearm as he orbits the worktable, his eyes closed, his sandals disintegrating. You resist the urge to yell timber when he wobbles. Tea first, you ask, holding up a cup of sage mint. He spins past, knocking it from your hand. The clay shatters, a sound not unlike his hip, connecting with the date palm. Traditional Sufi rituals rarely included pratfalls. You sweep shards with a palm frond, humming the lullaby you'd crooned to the slave boy. The dervish finds his rhythm again, or at least stops assaulting the furniture. Cedar smoke clings to his robes, a portable purification bubble. Scorpions hate the scent, a fact you learned after that ill-advised nap in the granary. His now herbicidal aura could sanitize a battlefield. He finally collapses, a human top spent against the saffron sacks. The caliph's tax collector comes at noon. He gasps, draping an arm over his eyes. I need clarity, and possibly a chiropractor. You hand him water in a bruised pomegranate shell. His fingers tremble calluses shaped like prayer beads. Funny how mystics always need favors from mortals who can't levitate. You sprinkle more cedar onto coals, a gesture that's part sacrament, part fumigation. They say you bargained with a Ifrit in the Mukatam caves. He wheezes, eyeing your herb drawers like they might contain gin. You snort. The only demon you've met is the one who sold you overpriced galangal root last Ramadan. I traded it honeycomb for safe passage. It preferred sweets to souls, shocking. The dervish frowns, as if this ruins his thesis on interdimensional barter systems. Outside, a donkey brays at an unsold melon. The dervish's breathing steadies, his gaze pinned to the smoke tendrils. The cedar of Lebanon was aboard Noah's Ark, you know. And look how that turned out for the unicorns. You counter, plucking a stray thread from his hem. He chuckles, a sound like gravel sliding down a hill. You press a sachet of powdered resin into his palm, avoiding the blisters. Burn this tomorrow, or eat it. I'm not your mother. He departs as he arrived, in a flurry of questionable choices. The courtyard tiles bear scuff marks that'll outlast the caliphate. Cedar ash coats the tortoise's shell, giving it the look of a miniature comet. You sweep until your hands smell like a carpenter's ghost. Somewhere the tax collector sharpens his reed pens. Somewhere closer, the dervish's abandoned sandal mocks you from the fig tree. Steep another cup. Hold the heat against your palms. Pretend it's enough. The widow's veil flutters like a wounded moth at your threshold. She hesitates, as if grief waits the air itself. Cairo's midday glare silvers her silhouette, the sort of heat that turns perfume to vinegar in the bottle. Her fingers clutch an empty vial, dusty as a forgotten tomb offering. You gesture to the alcove where Viziers once plotted coups, now dominated by a mortar crusted with last week's frankincense. Sit before the tax collector's shadow darkens my door. You murmur, plucking a withered narcissus from her trembling grip. Fatimid mourning veils were dyed with saffron, a luxury reserved for nobles who could afford to weep in gold. You spotted the threads yourself in a palace drainage ditch, dull now like her eyes. She speaks in sentences that fray, a husband's corpse left in Alexandria's riots, a daughter bartered to a spice trader's gouty uncle. The pestle grinds stigma by precious stigma until your knuckles glow yellow. 10 threads per dirham, the going rate for gilded sorrow. Historians still argue whether noblewomen's tears held political weight or just rotted their silk kerchiefs. Steam wisps from the copper pot, honey swirls into liquid amber. You float a fig on the surface, its wrinkled skin bloating with stolen bitterness. Cleopatra drank this, yes, to mourn her Roman. Her voice cracks, a papyrus scroll left in the rain. You nearly mention the Ptolemaic queen's more practical use of saffron pessaries. But why shatter delusions? Let her cling to the romance of poisoned asp and milk baths. 3 sips at dawn. You lie knowing full well the brew's only magic is its cost. She grimaces, then laughs, a sound like glaze splitting on a ceramic cup. The tax collector's donkey brays outside, impatient as a jilted suitor. She leaves an onyx hairpin, its edges smoothed by decades of winding braids. You'll trade it for peppercorns tomorrow, or maybe just another vial of counterfeit saffron. The broth's dregs cling to the cup, tiny suns drowning in residue. Your hands smell like a spice merchant's ledger. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, the widow's footsteps dissolve into the souk's cacophony. You lick honey from your thumb, sweetness cut with the metallic tang of regret. Steep another pot. Hide the good saffron under the floor tiles. Pretend you don't hear the taxman's knuckles on the wood. The taxman's coins clink in his pouch, a sound like dried beetles in a jar. You're scraping saffron residue from your nails when footsteps scuff the courtyard gravel, too light for the debt collector. A eunuch hovers at the threshold, his hem embroidered with ibises. Under one arm, a bamboo cage sways its occupant, a flash of scarlet fury. The parrot shrieks, a sound like pomegranate seeds spat on marble. Two mangled feathers protrude from its wing, the quills snapped clean. It imitated the caliph's laugh during prayers. The eunuch mutters. His voice lacks the bird's vigor, a reed flute trying to mimic a storm. You recall palace rumors, trained parrots whispering court secrets to rival viziers. Peering closer, you spot tiny belladonna berries in the cage's feed tray. Nettle root simmers in a clay pot, its earthy stink overpowering the last traces of jasmine. Crushed lavender buds follow, petals disintegrating like ash on the pestil's edge. The eunuch flinches when you reach for the bird, a man more accustomed to serving pain than soothing it. You pry open the parrot's beak, its tongue flickers against your thumb, and dribble in honeyed chamomile. Calm comes swift, the bird's pupils shrinking to pinpricks. Fatimid gardeners planted nettles between rose bushes, believing their sting warded off jinn. You rip a leaf, sear it with a candle, press the pulp to the broken quills. The eunuch watches his breath sour with unresolved questions. Will it speak again? He ventures. Historians still argue whether royal parrots were spies or just decorative liars. You bandage the wing with linen strips, stolen last week from a mummification workshop. The bird croaks a mangled verse from the Quran, its voice sand-scratched, but intact. The eunuch's shoulders slump relief or exhaustion. His coin purse yields 3 silver dirhams and a cherry pit. You pocket the metal, toss the seed into a bowl of withered coriander. Outside, a donkey brays in perfect imitation of the caliph's youngest son. The eunuch stiffens, then scurries into the alley, cage clattering like a drunkard's teeth. Your fingers ache from the bird's grip, tiny talon marks blooming on your wrist. You daub them with leftover salve, the sting a reminder of last summer's scorpion bite. A feather drifts to the floor, iridescent as oil on Nile mud. Beneath the tiles, the hidden saffron waits. Above the mosque's shadow stretches across the courtyard like a beggar's palm. Steam rises from the cooling poultice, carrying secrets even the parrot won't repeat. The ruby ring gleams like a drop of congealed blood against your work table's scarred wood. Your still wiping parrot salve off your fingers when the spy enters, a lean shadow smelling of sandalwood oil and forged ledgers. His smile reveals teeth filed to points. A Yemeni desert custom some claim wards off evil spirits. You pretend not to notice the sickle-shaped dagger hilt beneath his robe, its curve mirroring the moon outside. 3 clay cups rest between you, each one intentionally flawed to honor Allah's perfection. He spins the ruby across the table, its facets catching lamplight in staccato bursts. A gift from the southern mines, he purrs. You know those pits better than pilgrims, workers there once swallowed emeralds to smuggle gems in their guts. The ring stops spinning, its engraved eye staring upward. Demand implied. Threat absorbed. Copper scales tremble as you weigh valerian root, its stench of wet socks filling the workshop. True poppy syrup vanished last week, replaced by a honey mustard slurry that mimics the real venom. Historians still argue whether Fatimid interrogators used truth drafts or just good old-fashioned thumbscrews. You trickle rosewater into the mortar, watching the spy's reflection in the liquid. His nails are bitten to the quick, a scholar's habit. The draft bubbles, a frothy brown reminiscent of Nile floodwaters. He leans closer, sandalwood giving way to the acrid tang of fierce wet. Double the dose. He insists, fingers twitching toward his hidden blade. You add a pinch of licorice powder, harmless filler to sell the lie. His knee bounces now, a jackrabbit pulse beneath silk. This one's new to betrayal. Outside, a drunkard bellows, a Bedouin love song, off-key and maudlin. The spy's shoulders tense, muscles coiled like scorpion tails. You pour the lukewarm brew into a carnelian flask, its stopper carved with wards against gin. His payment disappears into your sash. The ruby's WEIGHT, Chinese letter, yet familiar. A merchant's daughter once traded 7 such rings for an abortion tonic, her laugh sharper than any dagger. He hesitates at the door dawn's first light, etching his profile in tarnished silver. For a heartbeat, you consider warning him about the Vizier's taste for poisoned earrings, about the way mustard honey curdles in wine. But the courtyard gate creaks, a conspirator's signal, and he's gone. You wash the mortar with vinegar, erasing all traces of the recipe. The sun rises, its heat baking the alley's urine stench into something almost medicinal. In the distance, a muezzin's cough interrupts the call to prayer, a tubercular rattle you've been meaning to treat. Your thumbnail picks at the ruby setting, a hairline crack revealing paste beneath guilt. You smirk. Some secrets, it seems, even the spies don't know. The muezzin's cough still lingers in your ears when the prince's nurse arrives, her knuckles rapping the doorframe like a woodpecker on amphetamines. Your elbow deep in deboned scorpions Monday's problem, but royal summons trump all. Her coal-lined eyes dart to your poison cabinet. He's tearing the tapestries again, she whispers, up 3 flights of spiral stairs, past the scribe who moonlights as a beard forger. You enter a vaulted chamber reeking of fear piss and rosewater. The prince drools into silk cushions, his sleep shirt drenched. Historians love debating whether Fatimid royals used nightmares as political tools, proof of divine disfavor. You note his bitten tongue, a crescent wound from gritted teeth. The nurse describes it between hiccups. A jackal with obsidian fangs, soundless, tearing through walls like wet parchment. Classic Badefontein imagery, if you believe those Macedonian scrolls about shadow creatures. You kneel by the cedar chest, its lock picked with a hairpin from the caliph's 3rd favorite concubine. Inside, sandalwood oil aged since Al-Hakim's reign, scent locked tighter than a merchant's purse. Sacred grove in Aswan, you mutter dabbing oil onto wool batting. The nurse flinches. 16th century traitors claimed Aswani monkeys would duel intruders over sandalwood saplings, probably just opium fog. The oil glistens, top notes of petrichor, bass tones like a buried cathedral. You rub it into the pillows, seam massaging clockwise to honor Ra's journey. The prince whimpers, a wet, larval sound. His nursemaid crosses herself, then corrects it to a hasty forehead swipe. You slip a myrrh lozenge under his tongue, ensuring he'll swallow, not choke. Practicality beats piety every dawn. Outside, guards argue about pigeon racing odds, their gossip softer than the prince's breaths. 3 drops on each wrist, a placebo for the waking hours. The nurse eyes your vial. Will it? You snap the chest shut. Sacred trees can't cure existential dread, just wrap him tighter. She blushes. A discarded betrothal contract peeks from her sash. The poor still not love letters into children's swaddles, as if affection guards against night terrors. You pocket the leftover oil key evidence if the vizier investigates. Descending the stairs, you pass a eunuch scrubbing cumin stains, his hummed tune suspiciously similar to yesterday's drunkard ballad. Dawn stains the courtyard blood-oran. A color poets call the caliphs secret shame. Your sandalwood slick fingers trace the banister, its carvings worn smooth by generations of panicked messengers. Back in the workshop, you uncork a jar of fermented figs, breakfast of champion poisoners. The myrrh lingers on your palate sharp as the spies filed teeth. Somewhere above, a tapestry rips, thread by dyed silk thread. You picture the prince's beast, all teeth and consequence. Turns out even royal nightmares smell like sandalwood and poor life choices. The fig's stickiness clings to your palm like regret, stolen sugar, lingering from yesterday's bargain. You wipe your hand on a time-stained apron, already regretting the gardener's dawn visit. Across the workbench, blue lotus petals bruise under glass, their scent a sleepy murmur against Cairo's rising heat. She arrived clutching blossoms plucked from the palace pond, petals curled like drowned fingers. Insomnia's worse than dysentery. She'd hissed her braids, threaded with alarmingly fresh honeysuckle. You hid the jar of shredded nightshade, letting her marvel at your saffron salves. Instead, bargaining with palace staff requires more theater than the caliphs' puppet shows. Now, you crush lotus stamens with a honeyed pestle, an old Alexandrian trick to temper bitterness. Blue dye seeps under your nails, staining them the same bruised indigo as vintage mourning veils. Historians still argue whether Fatimid herbalists used lotus pollen to induce trances or just impressive naps. Your fingertips tingle, either ancient alkaloids or last night's ill-advised camel milk cheese. A spider descends from the ceiling, its web glinting like a stolen necklace. You let it settle on the mortar's rim. Good luck, according to that tipsy Persian astrologer. Defend my workspace, you murmur, knowing full well spider alliances expire at feeding time. The paste thickens, pale gold swirling into cobalt. Outside, the gardener's voice tangles with a eunuch's nasal complaints about aphids. Let them argue. You've got 27 minutes before the muezzin's next call ruins the infusion's focus. Grind faster. 8th century Nubian texts swore blue lotus tea could make men recall past lives, handy for revisiting better investments. You bottle the salve, wax sealing it with a thumbprint. The gardener's payment sits wrapped in reed paper, 3 figs oozing syrupy smugness. Supposedly, Rashidun-era treaties were sealed with dried fruit instead of wax, a practice abandoned after too many ant infestations. You pocket 1 fig, breakfast insurance, against the Viziers' imminent mood swings. Dust motes swirl where the spider abandoned ship. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a lute string snaps mid-ballad, a high, wounded sound. You inhale lotus residue, your thoughts blurring at the edges like poorly mixed ink. Maybe the Macedonian scrolls were right about one thing. Every remedy's just a negotiated truce with chaos. The salve's label smudges under your thumb, a stray hieroglyph no one's deciphered since Cleopatra's pet scribe croaked. Doesn't matter. Sleep comes cheaper than loyalty in these walls. You count lotus petals, their count matching the gardener's promised number. Surprising that. Place the vial on the windowsill, light refracting through blue glass to cast aquatic shadows. They'll collect it after sunset, once the courtyard guards rotate. Until then, the salve pulses like a captive heartbeat, patient as a scorpion under sand. The lute's snapped string still vibrates in your ears as footsteps echo through the arcade, a dry cough punctuating each stride. You recognize the rhythm. 12 steps, a wet wheeze, the clink of prayer beads. The muezzin's silhouette fills the doorway, his throat wrapped in scarves despite the heat. You toss ginger root onto the cutting board, fibrous flesh resisting the blade. Lost your sunrise cadence, you say, slicing through another knobby tuber. His answering laugh becomes a rattling gasp. 8th century physicians prescribed licorice for singers' throats, though they preferred it boiled in mare's milk. You'll skip the dairy. Rumors about the palace stables still turn your stomach. He slides a velvet pouch across the table, the clink of silver dirhams under fabric. 3 nights, he rasps, fingernails stained from holding mosque lamps. My voice cracks like a heretic's spine. You pretend not to notice the blood flecking his sleeve. The licorice root splits under your pestle, sweet dust rising like powdered amber. Historians still argue whether Fatimid herbalists transmitted coded messages in remedy formulations. Let them debate. You're too busy layering shaved ginger over the muezzin's coins, a petty revenge for his 4 a.m. volume last Ramadan. He eyes the copper kettle, its spout, whistling a teapot's version of the adhan. Boil both roots with honey. You instruct dipping a finger into the syrup pot. But swallow the ginger whole if you're feeling theatrical. His frown says he's considering it. Devout men always fall for the worst ideas. Outside, a donkey brays at the spice merchant's cart, its cry almost harmonizing with the muezzin's congestion. You crush cardamom pods with unnecessary force, their shells popping like tiny firecrackers. Avoid the caliph's new singer, you add. That boy's voice could break wine goblets. The muezzin pockets the remedy, his scarves leaving a trail of saffron threads. As he exits, you spot a sparrow trapped in the courtyard's lemon tree. Its wings beat against thorns, frantic as a sinner during Judgment Day. You scatter millet through the lattice, a small mercy before reaching for the hidden jar. Nightshade seeds glitter like obsidian tears beneath your floorboard. 3 drops into the muezzin's leftover tea, insurance against future pre-dawn proclamations. Cruelty? Hardly. The palace runs on strategic silences as much as shouted prayers. Moonlight pools in your mortar, lichen green residue from yesterday's failed aphid deterrent. You scrape it clean with a spatula forged from Damascus steel. 10th century poets claimed such blades could split a moonbeam. Yours struggles with dried sage. The sparrow escapes, a blur of brown feathers through fading daylight. You lick licorice dust from your palm, its sweetness undercut by ginger's peppery burn. Somewhere beyond the souk, a drunk philosopher debates star patterns with a stray cat. Normalcy. Tomorrow brings the Viziers' monthly inspection, and with it, demands for tinctures to steady his unsteady hands. Tonight, though, the syrup thickens, its surface gleaming like liquid tiger's eye. You pour it into clay ampoules, each stoppered with wax from beehives sacked last spring. The muezzin's cough fades into the distant call to Maghrib prayer, each note smoother than the last. Effective remedy or divine intervention? Unclear. You count dirhams by lamplight, their edges nibbled by generations of anxious teeth. When the spider returns, legs dusted with flour from the baker's roof, you leave a saffron crumb on its vacant web. Tomorrow's problem. The vial of nightshade winks from the shadowed shelf, patient as a vizier's unmet promise. Dawn will come. It always does. The poet stumbles in ink smudged across his chin like war paint. His hands tremble, pages clutched to his chest bleached to verses. You arch an eyebrow, a prince of pentameters brought low by silence. Basil crumbles between your fingers, its clove-kissed scent cutting through the room's musk. 10th century Baghdad's house of wisdom kept entire scrolls on Osimum basilicum's virtues. None mention its true power, unclogging minds choked by their own brilliance. He collapses onto a cushion, lapis lazuli rings clicking against empty inkwells. The words hide, he croaks. You note his thumbnail nod to the quick. Constantinople's scholars once believed chewing basil leaves sparked prophetic visions. You're aiming lower today. Basic coherence. Sunlight glints off your mortar's edge, the one looted from a Byzantine monastery. Historians still argue whether Arab herbalists stole Greek remedies or interpretively borrowed them. You grind fresh leaves stolen or not into emerald paste. Drink this, you say, pouring hot water over the crushed herbs. But first burn that tunic. The garment reeks of panic sweat and oud perfume. His horrified gasp confirms it belongs to a rival poetess. The infusion swirls, green tendrils rising like cursive script. Medieval Persians called basil the Sultan's scribe, claiming it, let even fools impersonate wise men. You doubt it'll transform this lovesick scribbler, but gold spends either way. He gulps the brew, wincing at bitterness you didn't bother to mask. Outside, a street vendor hawks roasted pistachios, their shells cracking in time with the poet's anxious knee bounces. You press a honeycomb chunk into his palm, charity disguised as practical advice. Suck on this. Your metaphors are sticky enough. His eyes widen, suddenly tracking a gecko scaling the window lattice. Like unspoken sonnets, climbing toward light, he murmurs. Progress. You resist pointing out the insect legs dangling from the gecko's mouth. No need to disrupt fragile momentum. A donkey brays in the distance, its cry mangling the muezzin's noon call. The poet jerks upright, quill already scratching parchment. Voices tangled in beastly throats, truths too crude for human tongues. You sprinkle dried basil into his inkpot, a trick Baghdad's Viziers used for diplomatic letters. Whether it softens harsh words or just stains the paper festive green remains unproven. He writes like a man possessed, nib splitting under pressure. Scarlet ink bleeds through the page, expensive Veronese cochineal wasted on bad erotic couplets. You count his coins while he's distracted, 3 dirhams short. Typical. The basil, he gasps, hand clutching his sternum. It burns like her cruelty like. You sip your own cooling tea, untouched by poetic afflatus. Indigestion, you deadpan. Next time, chew slower. His quill snaps, a final stanza sacrificed to melodrama. Through the open window floats the scent of baking flatbread, a earthy counterpoint to his overwrought perfume. You slide a clay tablet toward him, carved with yesterday's failed ode to a concubine's eyebrow. Rewrite this, you suggest. Less azure horizons of your gaze, more your eyes aren't bloodshot today. Authenticity sells. He looks appalled, then intrigued. The basil's working after all. As he departs, new verses fluttering from his sash. Like drunk butterflies, you replant the herb pot. Let historians debate whether poets or pharmacists truly shaped the golden age's literary canon. You've got crumbs to sweep, a money box still light, and the smug certainty that tomorrow he'll be back, begging for Rosemary's rumored aid with rhyme schemes. Dusk stains the mortar's curves violet. Somewhere beyond the souk, your basil bush thrives, its leaves already whispering promises to the next blocked soul. The mortar still smells of basil when he slips in a shadow clinging to shadows. You recognize the tilt of his head. Chief eunuchs learn to bow without ever lowering their eyes. His silk slippers whisper across tiles looted from Carthage. A Fatimid victory. Your aching knees resent every dawn. He exhales, a sound like parchment burning. They've erased his name from the stables, from the mosaics, even the tax ledgers. You uncork a jar of dried rue, its acrid bite masking the scent of his fear. Court records confirm eunuchs supervised everything from caliphal wardrobes to naval fleets. But nostalgia makes fools of even the powerful. Your pestle grinds pomegranate seeds, ruby beads dissolving into pulp. 7th century Persian physicians touted its juice for increasing vigor, results likely exaggerated by merchants with vineyards to sell. The eunuch's ringed finger taps the table, obsidian set in silver, shaped like a lion's paw. A relic from quieter days when his voice could make Viziers tremble. Drink it before the muezzin's third call. You warn, pouring the mixture into a vial. He hesitates, eyelids flickering like a cornered hare's. Historians still argue whether palace eunuchs fueled Abbasid decadence or just survived it. You're more concerned with this one's ability to pay. His throat works as he swallows, Adam's apple bobbing over a collar embroidered with forgotten heraldry. Rue's bitterness always hits first. It's why Andalusian apothecaries called it the regretful herb. The effect follows a straightened spine, fingers flexing as if gripping reins again. For 3 breaths, maybe 4, he's not a relic, but the man who once stabled the royal cheetahs. Al-Muntasir, he rasps, a name banned since the coup. You pretend not to hear. Death warrants pay poorly. His reflection glimmers in your bronze scales, cheeks flushed beneath henna'd patterns. 10th century Iraqi poets claimed pomegranate could reverse gray. Hares provided you drank it under a waning moon. You've yet to see proof beyond placebo and wishful thinking. A jackal wails beyond the palace walls. The sound plucks at his temporary vigor. He pockets the empty vial, hand lingering where a scimitar once hung. Will it last? You gesture to dawn's first glow, the truth kinder than words. His gold coins click on the table, 3 extra for secrets you'll bury beneath the time pots. Outside, a gardener clips jasmine, ignoring the eunuch's straightened gait as he passes. You soak the mortar with rose water, erasing all traces of the band name. Some ghosts only walk when given a body's weight in gold. The rue's aftertaste lingers, sharp as the day you first soldered desperation into hope. Tomorrow brings some other shadow chasing faded glories. For now, the coins warm your palm, and the pomegranate tree outside buds, despite last week's sandstorm. Life's persistent that way. The eunuch's gold still warms your purse when common-laced dust announces his return. You smirk. Fatimid spice merchants move like monsoon winds, all bluster and delayed arrivals. His camel's bell clanks, a rusty heartbeat swallowed by the souk's din. Tattered silks flap from the beast's humps, Baghdad's fallen luxury, repurposed as saddle padding. He kicks a sack onto your table, peppercorns spill like obsidian hail. Zanzibar's shores reek from every wrinkled pod, salt crust and seaweed clinging to their ridges. 10th century ledgers name the island Zanzibar, land of the blacks, where divers hauled ambergris for caliphal perfumers. You crush one between molars, heat blooms behind your eyes. Stole these from a Gujarati smuggler, or just as grave. His laugh reveals a missing incisor, the gap whistles like a tea kettle. Graves don't haggle. The air thickens with ginger root and deceit. You've heard rumors. Arab traders chewed peppercorns to test freshness, their tongues blistering for honest wares. This batch tastes of fire and frankincense, and the metallic tang of stolen cargo. Dawn filters through date palm lattices, striping his turmeric-stained turban. You count coins under breath, 3 dinars short. He shrugs, palm calloused from ropes that hauled Cindy, indigo, up the Red Sea. Historians still argue whether medieval spices functioned as currency or just cruel reminders of what kitchens lacked. You're arguing for both as he pockets your silver. A mule brays outside, its load of Omani copper, ingots clattering. The merchant tenses, eyes darting to the alley. You've seen this twitch before, men chased by shadows of unpaid port taxes. Customs officers keep their whips oiled these days. You murmur, sweeping peppercorns into an apothecary jar. His sweat sours the air, clove-scented panic. He mutters a prayer to St. Nicholas, patron saint of pawnbrokers and repentant thieves. You blink Christian symbiosis in a Muslim empire. Wood made a fine footnote in Ibn Khaldun's chronicles, if he'd cared for the profane. A wasp drifts in dizzy on overripe figs. You crush it with the pestle, adding sacrificial venom to the mix. The monsoon stalled near Sakatra. He whispers, as if weather excuses theft. You recall 9th century ship logs, how captains buried peppercorns in rice to mask mold during squalls. Survival's always been half deception. His fingers drum a war chant on the table, each tap costing him another dirham in goodwill. Sunlight glints off a blemished pod. You flick it aside. Tell the Jinni of Aden I want unbroken stems next time. He pales, superstition outweighing greed. Some say desert spirits cling to ill-gotten spices, itching to curse unprepared mouths. His retreating footsteps echo through the spice sacks, each one straining at its hemp seams. You roast a handful over coals, acrid smoke stinging your nostrils. The Black Death centuries Hensel have Europeans paying peppers weight in gold for empty hope. But here, now, it's just another Monday. A beggar's child peers through the doorway, eyes wide as Cretan ceramic bowls. You toss her a peppercorn, watch her gag on paradise. The mortar brims with cracked black spheres, their scent sharp enough to resurrect pharaohs, or at least annoy the cat napping by the brazier. Your fingers stain yellow-brown, a temporary tattoo of commerce. Across the courtyard, a slave sings while carding wool, his melody older than Memphis. You hum along, crushing Zanzibar into Cairo one grind at a time. Dusk arrives pale as a leper's palm. You light sesame oil lamps, their smoke curling around jarred spices like possessive gin. The peppercorns glisten, each a miniature cosmos of greed and geography. Somewhere beyond the Nile, a ship founders in the dawn-pink shallows, its hold heavy with answers to prayers no one remembers making. You sprinkle the last dust into a Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Tonight's experiment in culinary exorcisms. The world spins on such tiny rebellions. The Queen's messenger arrives caked in rosewater, and panic his beard, glistening with jasmine oil from her vanity. He shoves a lacquered box at you inside. Peach pits clatter like withered knuckles. 13 in total unlucky, even before considering their cyanide grin beneath the fuzz. Her Highness's latest whim floats on papyrus, a recipe cribbed from some Alexandrian grimoire. Boil until dawn, strain through virgin linen, 7 sips at moon's zenith. You snort. Virgins in Cairo are rarer than honest tax collectors. Her chambers boast 36 Venetian mirrors, each a trophy from crusader loot. 10th century caliphs called mirrors windows for the soul, though hers might just reflect dwindling patience. You grind a pit with the heel of your pestle. Almond sweetness masks the bitter core. Historians still argue whether Arab alchemists truly believed in immortality elixirs, or just enjoyed watching nobles drink crushed gems. Tonight's answer: hibiscus petals stewed in date syrup, a crimson sleight of hand. A slave girl watches, her wrists bruised from scrubbing tarnished silver. You slip her a dried fig. Tell the kitchens I need pomegranate molasses and more rose thieves. She grins, recalling last week's scandal when the Vizier's wife smuggled Bulgarian adder in her underrobe. The Queen's obsession isn't new. Cleopatra bathed in saffron milk. Persephone nibbled death itself for vanity. You stir the vial, sunset hues pooling like liquid carnelian. Moonlight stripes the courtyard, ibises peck at discarded peach flesh. Ancient Chinese texts warned of bitter kernels, causing stiffened tongues, but Her Highness craves the danger. You bury the toxic kernels beneath the oleander bush, their poison seeping into roots already steeped in betrayal. The substitute, brew smells of summer weddings, nothing like the tomb scent described in her scroll. She arrives in a clatter of anklets, henna'd hands, clutching a sapphire-studded cup. Mirrors multiply her frown lines. Where's the resinous aftertaste? The scroll promised dragon's breath. You bow lower than dignity allows. Perfection takes patience. Celestial one-like pearls forming around grit. Her sigh carries myrrh and disillusionment. When she drains the goblet, her throat moves like a mouse swallowing a sphinx. The slave girl returns, palm outstretched. You drop a dirham into her calluses. For the muezzin's nephew, tell him the willow bark worked. She hesitates. They say the queen's new scribe writes with peacock quills dipped in lynx blood. You chuckle. Tomorrow's problem. Tonight, the hibiscus hums in her highness's veins, placebo majesty, under a sky dense with unconvinced stars. You kneel beside the pallet, his breath rasps like papyrus dragged over sand. The fever's grip reddens his skin, sun-baked brick beneath your palm. His mother hovers a shadow in the oil lamp's tremor. Her fingers knot the frayed hem of her robe. Mallow leaves float in a clay bowl, Nile water drawn at twilight. You crush them to paste, their slime cool as frogskin. 6th century physicians praised this green goo in scrolls now dust. Modern scholars mock their crocodile dung poultices, but even idiots get lucky sometimes. The paste slithers across his forehead. He whimpers, a sound that lodges in your molars. Hush, little ibis, you murmur a lullaby from your own mother's tongue. Historians still argue whether those river hymns held real power, or if desperation alone brewed miracles. You wring out a linen cloth, drip drip onto the packed earth floor. His mother flinches at each splash. Outside, a donkey brays the hour when night nurses its darkest thoughts. The boy's wrist pulses like a trapped sparrow. You count beats against your own too fast, too thin. His eyelids flutter, showing slivers of salt white. Some palace herbalists swear by leeches for such fevers. You'd sooner stuff a scorpion down the caliph's robes. A breeze sneaks through the reed walls, carrying tamarind smoke from the cook fires. His mother reaches for the water jar. They say the Nile's demons cause this, she whispers, that he looked too long at the moon's reflection. You snort. Demons take credit for every sneeze in Cairo. The paste dries crinkled, cracked earth on his brow. You scrape it off, reveal skin slightly cooler. His breath still hitches, but the sparrow's wings slow. His mother presses her cheek to his chest, listens for the tide's turn. 3 date pits click in your pocket, a gamble from the afternoon market. You slip one into her palm. For strength you lie. Truth tastes bitter tonight, let her suck on sweet fiction. She nods, tears cutting paths through the dust on her face. Dawn licks the horizon pale as a sick child's gums. The boy sleeps now, chest rising in shallow ripples. You hum the lullaby's final verse, vowels sinking into the straw mattress. Somewhere beyond the slave quarters, a rooster crow. The mother's fingers uncurl empty, but no longer shaking. The dawn air still clings to your sleeves damp with the boy's fading fever sweat. Footsteps echo in the corridor, too heavy for servants. You recognize the jingle of a certain silver belt. The Vizier's shadow bruises the threshold before he enters. He sets a brass cup on your work table, its sides still steaming. Cinnamon wafts up, but beneath lurks something metallic. His smile's all teeth, a Nile crocodile sunning itself. Taste it, he says. A gift from your colleague in the West Wing. Historians still argue whether Fatimid court physicians used henbane as medicine or murder. Your tongue meets the liquid bitter as unripe persimmon, there the faintest numbing prickle. You school your face into calm. Poisons are the original dinner party small talk. Splendid, you lie. Though I'd add honeyed ginger to mask the aftertaste. The Vizier's thumb strokes his signet ring, a habit when nervous. That ring once held Abu al-Qasim's famous sleep toxin, at least according to Ibn Butlin's gossipy medical manuals. He leans closer. Loyalty requires a refined palate, wouldn't you say? You mimic his smile, sharper now. As refined as your taster's was before his unfortunate dysentery. The cup clatters as you return it. Let him wonder if you've built an immunity. Outside, a stable hand sings off-key cleaning muck from the caliph's prized stallions. The Vizier studies your shelves, jars of myrrh, sprigs of dried hyssop. His silence costs him 7 heartbeats. You count them. Henbane's floral notes lack subtlety. You add, amateurish, like using a warhammer to crack an almond. A muscle twitches in his jaw. Some men resent being outmaneuvered more than being poisoned. You gesture to the cup. Shall I prepare a detoxifying brew? Fenugreek neutralizes its worst effects. His laugh scrapes like pumice on marble. Perhaps later. The door slams behind him, taking half the oxygen with it. You exhale, realize you've been holding a mortar since he entered. The pestle leaves crescent marks in your palm. A bead of poison rolls down the cup's rim. You catch it with a scrap of linen, tuck the cloth into a lead-lined box. Waste not. One day, a rival might enjoy this vintage. The stable hand's song fades, replaced by the yowl of mating cats. You rinse your mouth with vinegar, spit into the drainage channel. Henbane's bitterness lingers like a bad rumor through the window. The Vizier's robed figure stalks across the courtyard. He pauses to kick a beggar's bowl, dates scattering like fallen stars. Your fingers find the lavender sachet sewn into your sash. Inhale, count to 5. Loyalty tests always reek of panic. The caliph's health must be worsening. You light a sprig of juniper. Its smoke curls into a question mark. The sun climbs higher. Somewhere, a henbane-drunk fly spirals to its death. You grind fresh licorice root, its sweetness a defiance. Let them bring their poisons. Every herbalist worth her salt knows the antidotes in the dosage. The beggar's dates still roll across packed earth when the farmers arrive, their hands split like drought-parched soil. One man clutches a withered olive branch, its leaves crunching to dust in his grip. You smell desperate sweat before they speak, a week's journey baked into their robes. The Nile's brother has forsaken us, croaks the eldest. Historians agree the Fayum Canal was the river's twin for irrigation. But you're not paid to fact-check peasant poetry. His son extends a clay bowl, cracked earth clumps where barley should sprout. The third farmer's sleeves show faded indigo, Upper Egypt's mark. They recount failed rituals, goats sacrificed at moonrise, maidens dancing with snakes. One tried burying a salted mirror upside down, a Coptic trick from his grandmother's tailies. You've heard odder methods. Last year, a Vizier's concubine buried 30 pearl earrings to cool the sun's wrath. The drought predates their fathers' fathers. You've seen this script before villages, offering half their children's names as tribute to rain gods. Still, you sift through their offering basket dates, a beetle shell bracelet, 2 desiccated mice. Court herbalists aren't priests, but desperation blurs professions. The youngest farmer's knees crack as he kneels, a sound like kindling snapping. Ancient canals, you mutter, tracing a map in spilled cumin. The Persians built underground qanats, shipped aquifer water for 3 centuries. Their blank stares suggest they'd prefer magic. You compromise, grind natron salt with dried Nile mud, chant Ptolemaic hymns under your breath. Scholars still debate whether Cleopatra's hydromancers ever truly summoned floods, or just redirected existing ones with better PR. They watch you scatter the salt mixture, each grain catching sunlight like false promises. The eldest presses his forehead to your threshold. Will it work? You count his ribs through the tunic, close your eyes, lie. Sow hope like caraway seeds, bitter but persistent. At sundown, you pour their offering mice into the compost heap. Ants swarm the carcasses, nature's own tax collectors. The Nile breeze carries a familiar stench, another cattle herd perished upstream. You wash salt from your hands, watch it swirl down the drain. Sleep brings no answers. 3 days later, news arrives, the farmer's village well collapsed, no survivors. You burn myrrh for them anyway. Downstairs, a kitchen girl hums, stirring soup thickened with stolen temple flour. The world keeps starving, and you keep sprinkling salt on its tongue. The floorboard creaks dry as the farmer's lost harvest. Your knee finds the loose oak plank, third from the north wall. It groans upward, revealing vials wrapped in lamb's intestine. You'd laugh at the cliché if court life weren't penned by hack poets. 1 flask winks emerald belladonna brewed during the last plague. Fatimid, Viziers famously stockpiled atropine for, let's say, diplomatic disagreements. Historians still argue whether Caliph al-Mustansir's rivals died of dysentery or convenient digestive distress. Your little collection's humbler. That cloudy vial, nightshade squeezed during the scorpion star's zenith, brewers swore it amplified potency. The coral-tinted one holds a gift from the baker's widow. Her husband's heart failure fouled 3 breakfast dates. You never asked how she filched the garrison commander's stash. The rules are simple. For every failed salt ritual, every collapsed well, you add a drop to the cellar's wine reserves. Not enough to kill, just to remind. A noble's sudden headache at council. A general's missed war meeting. Slow corrections, like pruning a diseased fig tree. Dust motes swirl in the lamplight, dancing around the main attraction. The blackened glass bottle sealed with a caliph's signet ring, pried from a corpse. You found it buried beneath the compost heap during the year of rotting mangoes. Carbon dating would place it around the reign of Al-Hakim, that eccentric who banned women from cobblers' shops. Not that science matters here. The thick syrup inside smells like fermented apricots, tastes like oblivion with a honeyed rim. Palace gossip claims Hatshepsut's assassins used tainted figs. You prefer efficiency. One drop in the cistern, 43 seconds before the first scream. 4.5 minutes until the Viziers' pet peacocks topple from their roosts. 18 to stillness, a silence so complete you could hear a scarab roll dung uphill. You've imagined it nightly since the kitchen girl disappeared, since the farmer's bones started bleaching, since drought relief meant selling their daughters to Syrian slavers. The hinges shriek as you reset the floorboard. Dust settles, a poor man's snowstorm. Out in the corridor, the muezzin's cough echoes, unaware his evening tea now sports a smoky aftertaste. You'll call it protective balance. The scholars in Kahira might term it treason, but history's written by the ones who survive their own poisons. From the balcony, the Nile glints, a serpent shedding its silver skin. Somewhere downstream, a fisherman hauls in nets heavy with perch, their gills flare, sucking water that knows all your secrets. Let it talk. You stir honey into your nightcap, sweetness to mask the root's bite. Dawn's first adhan will sound in 7 hours. The drops work in 6. The honey sticks to your ribs. A poor imitation of your mother's apricot preserves. You dump yesterday's sage leaves into the brazier, their smoke curling into serpentine tendrils. 7 ceramic jars glint on the shelf, each labeled with a thief's shorthand. Myrrh from that Nubian trader still smells like camel sweat and broken promises. Historians still argue whether Fatimid alchemists used lunar cycles or pure guesswork for their tinctures. Your money's on the latter. You crush dried sage between your palms, the sound like mice scurrying through papyrus. 1 spoonful of myrrh, resin, stolen during the Ramadan riots of 92. The recipe demands amber, but the queen's necklace dissolved in vinegar years ago. Looters found her skeleton clutching a hollowed-out jewelry box. True story. The mortar hisses as you mix in Nile water drawn when Sirius kissed the horizon. Some claim the river's sweeter at midnight. You just hate queuing with laundry women. The brew steeps black as the Vizier's missing eye. You inhale steam that reeks of burnt rosemary. Or is that the gardener's hut smoldering again? Across the river, a donkey brays at the moon's reflection. Same, brother, you mutter, toasting the unseen beast, your cups brimming with contradictions. Sage for surrender, myrrh for memorials. Scholars in Fez would call it heresy, your clients call it relief. 3 sips in your toes go numb, the stars ripple like a dropped inkwell. Cleopatra allegedly dissolved pearls in vinegar to impress Roman fools. You'd trade every gem for a decent night's sleep. The cup warms your palms, even as the draft cools. Palace cats yowl in the distance, their chorus punctuated by a splash. Probably another servant dumping chamber pots, or the eunuch's parrot taking a midnight swim. Lanterns gutter along the docks, fishermen's daughters gut perch by lamplight, their knives glinting like misplaced constellations. You wonder if they taste the myrrh in the water yet. The moon sinks, a silver dirham swallowed by the Nile's dark purse. Historians will puzzle over tomorrow's silent corridors, the way the call to prayer stumbles mid-verse. Let them theorize over mugs of oversteeped chai. You've balanced the scales, or tipped them, depends who's telling the tale. The last sip tastes of nothing at all, a mercy. Your eyelids dip, the weight of quarried limestone. Through the haze, a figure emerges, hooded, smelling of tamarind and grave soil. They lift your empty cup, nod once, vanish. No use wondering if they're real. Dreams and poisons share the same currency here. The brazier sighs its embers, winking out one by one. Somewhere, a scarab rolls its cargo into the dark, keeping secrets better than any herbalist. The honey clings to your ribs, a pale echo of your mother's apricot preserves. You brush dried sage into the brazier, smoke curling into lazy spirals. 7 clay jars gleam faintly, marked with symbols only a thief could love. Myrrh from a far-off trader. It still smells of sun-baked leather and promises half-kept. Experts argue whether moonlit nights or luck guided those old alchemists. You've always trusted instinct. Your palms crumble sage. The sound whispers like reeds beneath bare feet. 1 pinch of myrrh, resin saved from the 92nd Ramadan's chaos. The recipe asks for amber, but the queen's jewels dissolved long ago. They say looters found her bones, cradling an empty box, truth or tale. It hardly matters now. The mortar murmurs as Nile water swirls, collected when dawn first brushed the river. Some claim midnight draws sweetness from the current. You prefer the hush before sunrise. The brew darkens black as the space between stars. Steam rises, scented with charred thyme and distant bonfires. A donkey's sigh floats over the water. You raise your cup in silent tribute. Herbs mingle memory and letting go. Scholars in distant cities might name this blasphemy, but your guests name it sleep. 3 sips, your feet melt into the floor mats. The sky blurs, ink spilled on damp parchment. Cleopatra, they whisper, drank pearls for foolish pride. You trade every gem for stillness. The cup nestles in your palms, warmth seeping into bone. Cats wail beyond the walls, their cries broken by a soft splash. Washerwomen, a duck diving, no matter. Lanterns sway along the docks, fisherfolk mend nets under trembling light. Their blades catch the moon, brief sparks in the gloom. You wonder if they'll taste the myrrh in tomorrow's catch. The horizon swallows the moon, a silver coin paid to the river. Let historians squabble over scrolls and steeping times. Your ledger balances tonight. The final sip holds emptiness, a kindness. Eyelids sink, stone heavy and slow. Through the haze, a shadow stirs, cloaked in cardamom and damp earth. They take your cup, nod, fade like smoke. Don't ask if they're dream or demon. Remedies and reveries bargain in the same shadowed market. The brazier exhales, embers dimming like reluctant fireflies. Somewhere, a beetle tumbles its prize through dust, guardian of secrets too old for words. In its patient rhythm, the world blurs, edges softening, until even the darkness feels like a lullaby.